The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched species crawl out of their primitive worlds and take their first steps into the void of space. The Council had welcomed some of these species into their great alliance. Others, they had crushed beneath their boots before they could become a threat. The Council was made up of 7 ancient races. They were tall and thin, with skin like silver and eyes that glowed soft blue. They were the oldest members and considered themselves They were massive, built like mountains with thick scales and 4 arms. They provided the military might. They were small and quick, with minds that could calculate faster than any computer. They handled the economics and trade. They were shapeshifters who dealt in secrets and diplomacy. They were beings of crystal and light, masters of energy technology. They were insect-like creatures who built the great ships that carried Council forces across the galaxy. And finally, there were ancient beings who rarely spoke but whose word was law when they did. Together, these 7 races had built something magnificent. Over 3,000 star systems answered to the Council. Hundreds of younger species paid tribute and followed their rules. Peace existed because the Council demanded it. War happened only when the Council allowed it. Grand Admiral of the stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Light. He was old even by standards, having lived for nearly 800 years. His silver skin had darkened with age and his blue eyes had grown dim. But his mind was still sharp, and his authority was absolute. Around him, officers from 3 different species worked at their stations. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship systems. Through the massive viewing window, could see the stars stretching out forever. He had seen this view thousands of times, but it never failed to fill him with pride. "Admiral," a young officer called out. His small hands moved quickly over his console. "We are approaching the coordinates." Nodded slowly. "How long until we arrive?" 3 standard hours, Admiral." The old turned to look at the tactical display in the center of the bridge. It showed his fleet in formation. 12 warships, each one powerful enough to destroy a small moon. 30 support vessels carrying soldiers, supplies, and equipment. It was not the largest fleet the Council had ever sent for a first contact mission, but it was more than enough. The mission was simple. 3 years ago, Council scouts had detected a new species in a distant corner of the galaxy. This region had always been considered empty and worthless. The stars there were young and unstable. The planets were mostly barren rocks. No sensible species would choose to live there. But somehow, life had found a way. The new species called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star. Initial scans showed they had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their ships were primitive by Council standards. Their weapons were laughable. Their population numbered only in the billions, spread across a handful of colonies. In other words, they were exactly like every other young species the Council had encountered. The protocol for such situations was well established. The Council fleet would arrive in force. They would demonstrate their superior technology and military power. The new species would be awed and frightened. Then the diplomats would step in with an offer. Join the Council as a subordinate member. Pay tribute. Follow the rules. In exchange, the new species would receive protection and access to advanced technology. Most species accepted immediately. The few that refused were made examples of. Their fleets were destroyed. Their colonies were burned. And the survivors were given one more chance to accept the Council's generous offer. Had conducted 17 such missions in his long career. Not once had a species successfully resisted. The outcome was always the same. "Admiral," another officer spoke up. This one was his massive form barely fitting in his chair. "I am detecting something strange." Raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The scanner readings from the human territory are not matching our initial reports." The Admiral walked over to the station. "Show me." The officer brought up the data on his screen. studied it for a moment, then frowned. According to the original scouts, the humans had perhaps 24 small ships, primitive vessels with weak shields and basic weapons, nothing that could threaten even a single Council warship. But these readings showed something different. There was a large mass at the edge of human space, very large, larger than anything the Council had ever built. "Is this a planet?" asked. The shook his head. "No, Admiral, the readings indicate it is artificial, a structure of some kind, or perhaps a ship." "A ship that size is impossible," said flatly. "Your instruments must be malfunctioning." "I have checked them 3 times, Admiral. The readings are accurate." Stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he straightened up and walked back to his command chair. "It changes nothing," he said. "Whatever this thing is, it cannot match the firepower of 12 Council warships. Continue on course." "Yes, Admiral." The fleet moved through space, faster than light, covering distances that would take ordinary ships centuries to cross. The stars blurred and stretched around them, and with each passing hour they drew closer to the human territory. 2 hours later, the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the designated coordinates. They were now at the very edge of human space. Ahead of them lay a sparse field of asteroids and a dim red star. According to the scouts, this was where the humans had built their first major outpost. But what the Council fleet found was not a simple outpost. "By the ancient stars," the officer whispered. Stood up from his chair. His old heart began to beat faster. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he barely recognized. Fear. The thing before them was a ship. That much was clear. It had a hull of dark metal that seemed to swallow the light of the stars. Its shape was angular and aggressive, covered in what could only be weapons. Hundreds of them. Thousands, perhaps. But it was the size that belief. The Eternal Light was one of the largest ships in the Council fleet. It measured 4 kilometers from bow to stern. It had taken the combined efforts of 3 species and 50 years to build. The human ship was easily 20 times larger. It hung in space like a sleeping giant. Its shadow covered the asteroid field completely. Next to it, the Council fleet looked like insects approaching a mountain. "That is not possible," said. His voice was barely a whisper. "No species could build something like that, not in 3 years, not in 300 years. "Admiral," the officer said, his voice was shaking. "The ship is powering up. They have detected us." As if in response to his words, lights began to appear along the human ship's hull. They started at the front and moved backward, thousands of points of light switching on one by one. The effect was like watching a city wake up. Then the ship turned. It was slow, but the motion was unmistakable. The massive vessel was rotating to face the Council fleet directly, and as it turned, got his first clear view of the ship's front. The bow was shaped like an arrow, sharp and pointed. At its center was a device that recognized instantly. It was a weapon, a cannon of some kind, but the barrel alone was larger than his entire flagship. "Admiral," the screamed. "Massive energy spike. They are preparing to fire." Panic swept through the bridge. Officers shouted orders. Alarms began to wail. The fleet started to scatter, ships moving in every direction as they tried to escape. But nothing happened. The energy reading spiked and then stabilized. The massive cannon did not fire. Instead, a different kind of signal reached the Council fleet. A communication signal. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported. His voice was barely steady, audio and visual. Took a deep breath. He smoothed his robes and forced his expression into something calm and dignified. Whatever these humans were, he was still a Grand Admiral of the Galactic Council. He would not show weakness. "Put it through," he ordered. The main viewing screen flickered. And then, for the first time in history, a human face appeared before the Galactic Council. It was a female, noted. At least, he assumed so based on the general features. She had brown skin and dark hair cut short. Her eyes were a deep brown, and they looked at the camera with a calm intensity that made uncomfortable. She wore a uniform of some kind. It was black with silver markings on the shoulders. Behind her could see a bridge far larger than his own. Other humans moved in the background, working at stations and monitoring displays. The woman smiled. It was a small smile, but it did not reach her eyes. "Greetings," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "I am Fleet Admiral of the United Earth Naval Command. I welcome you to human space." Forced himself to respond. "I am Grand Admiral of the Galactic Council. We come in peace to establish first contact with your species." The woman tilted her head slightly. "Peace, yes. We noticed your peaceful fleet of warships approaching our territory." She paused. "We also noticed that you did not request permission to enter our space." "The Galactic Council does not require permission," said. It was the standard response. The words came automatically. Admiral raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "We have come to offer your species membership in the Council," continued, following the script. "Under our protection, humanity will flourish. You will have access to technologies beyond your current understanding. Your people will know peace and prosperity." "And in exchange?" the human asked. "In exchange, you will acknowledge the Council's authority. You will pay tribute. You will follow our laws, and you will provide support to Council military operations when called upon." For a moment the human woman said nothing. She simply stared through the screen. Then she began to laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had heard a very stupid joke. "Admiral," she said when she had finished, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps you did not get a clear look at my ship when you arrived." She pressed something on her console, and the view shifted. Now could see the exterior of the human vessel. The camera was positioned to show its full length, from the pointed bow to the massive engines at the stern. "This is the UES Prometheus," Admiral said. "She is the first of our Titan-class warships. Her length is 87 kilometers. She carries a crew of 50,000. Her main cannon can crack a planet in half with a single shot. She has enough secondary weapons to destroy every ship in your fleet simultaneously." The view shifted again, showing them the space behind the Prometheus, and felt his heart stop. There were more ships, dozens of them, smaller than the Prometheus but still huge by Council standards. They were arranged in perfect formation, waiting silently in the darkness. "That is our first defensive fleet," Admiral continued. 53 vessels in total. They have been watching your approach for the past 3 days. We know the exact specifications of every ship in your fleet. We know your weapons, your shields, your engine capabilities. We know everything." The view returned to Admiral's face. Her smile was gone now. Her expression was cold and serious. "Did you really think we would be surprised by your arrival, Admiral? Did you think we would be frightened and overwhelmed by your little fleet? Did you expect us to bow and accept your authority?" Could not speak. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "Let me tell you something about humanity," Admiral said. "We did not claw our way up from the mud of our planet just to kneel before the first aliens we meet. We did not survive ice ages, plagues, wars, and near extinction just to become someone else's subjects. We built the Prometheus because we knew this day would come. We knew that the galaxy would not be empty, and we knew that whatever was out there would not simply welcome us as equals." She leaned forward. "So we prepared. For 200 years we prepared. We hid our true capabilities from your scouts. We let you see what we wanted you to see. And now here you are with your 12 warships and your demands for tribute." She paused. "So let me make a counteroffer, Admiral. You will turn your fleet around. You will return to your council and deliver a message from the people of Earth. We are not interested in joining your alliance as subordinates. We will not pay tribute. We will not follow your laws, but we are willing to discuss peaceful relations between equals. True equals, Nothing more, nothing less. The screen went dark. Stood in silence. Around him, his officers stared at their consoles, too shocked to speak. Through the viewing window, the massive shape of the Prometheus hung in space, watching them. The Grand Admiral of the Galactic Council had conducted 17 first-contact missions in his career. He had never failed. He had never been refused. Until today. He sat down slowly in his command chair. His hands were shaking. He thought of the Council, of the 7 ancient races who ruled the galaxy. He thought of their pride and their certainty that they were the supreme power in the universe. And he realized that everything was about to change. "Communications," he said quietly. "Yes, Admiral." "Send a message to the Council. Priority 1, tell them." He paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them we need to talk." Outside, the Prometheus waited. Its running lights blinked slowly in the darkness, like the eyes of a predator that had found its prey. But this predator was patient. It was not hungry for war. It simply wanted the galaxy to understand one simple truth. Humanity had arrived. And they were not afraid. The journey back to Council space took 4 days. For Grand Admiral, they were the longest 4 days of his life. He spent most of his time in his private quarters, staring out the window at the stars. He barely ate. He barely slept. The image of that massive human ship haunted him every time he closed his eyes. The Prometheus. That was what they had called it. A name from human mythology he had learned. A god who stole fire and gave it to mortals. How fitting, he thought. The humans had stolen fire indeed, and now they intended to burn everything the Council had built. His first officer, a young named, knocked on his door on the 2nd day. "Admiral," she said softly, "the Council has been sending messages. They demand a full report." "Tell them I will report when I arrive in person," replied. "Some things cannot be explained through messages." Hesitated. "Sir, there are rumors spreading through the fleet. The crew saw what happened. They are scared." "Good," said, "they should be." The young officer left and returned to his thoughts. He kept replaying the conversation with Admiral in his mind. He analyzed every word, every expression, every gesture. He was looking for weakness, for deception, for any sign that the humans were bluffing. He found nothing. The human Admiral had been confident but not arrogant. She had been threatening but not aggressive. She had spoken like someone who knew exactly what she was capable of, and that terrified him more than any amount of posturing could have. The Council had always assumed they were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Their technology was ancient and refined. Their ships were powerful and numerous. They had crushed every rival, absorbed every useful species, and eliminated every threat. But the humans had built the Prometheus in secret. They had hidden their true capabilities from Council scouts for years. They had allowed themselves to appear weak and primitive while they prepared for this exact moment. What else were they hiding? On the 3rd day, reviewed the tactical data his officers had gathered during the encounter. The numbers were sobering. The Prometheus had an energy output greater than a small star. Its shields could theoretically withstand a sustained bombardment from the entire Council fleet for hours. Its main cannon, that terrifying weapon at the bow, had an estimated yield that made feel sick just thinking about it. And that was just one ship. The humans had shown them 53 more vessels waiting behind the Prometheus. Smaller ships, yes, but still far larger than anything in the Council fleet. If war came, the Council would lose. That was the cold, hard truth. They might eventually overcome the humans through sheer numbers and industrial capacity, but the cost would be measured in billions of lives and thousands of destroyed worlds. The Council had not faced such a threat in over 8,000 years. On the 4th day, the fleet arrived at the Council. The planet had no name in the common tongue. The 7 founding species simply called it the Center. It was an artificial world, built over thousands of years by the combined efforts of all 7 races. Its surface was covered in cities of crystal and metal. Its orbit was filled with space stations and defensive platforms. A constant stream of ships came and went, carrying trade, diplomats, and soldiers from across the galaxy. Had seen the center many times, but today, looking down at the glittering lights of the great cities, he felt only dread. He was going to tell them their era of dominance was over. The council chamber was located at the exact center of the capital city. It was a massive domed structure made of materials that no longer existed anywhere else in the galaxy. The dome was transparent, allowing those inside to see the stars above. 7 great seats surrounded a central platform, one for each founding species. Around them, hundreds of smaller seats held representatives from the subject species. When entered, every seat was occupied. The news of his mission had spread. Everyone wanted to hear what he had found. The 7 high sat in their ancient seats. They were the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Between them, they commanded fleets that numbered in the millions of ships. They ruled over populations that numbered in the trillions. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean. And now they all stared at with expressions of confusion and concern. Hive spoke first. She was even older than her silver skin, so dark it was almost black. Her voice was thin but commanding. Grand Admiral, you were sent to conduct a simple first contact mission. You were given 12 of our finest warships, yet you return with your tail between your legs, speaking of giants and monsters. Explain yourself. Walk to the center of the chamber. He felt the weight of thousands of eyes on him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. I have served the council for 800 years. I have fought in 17 wars. I have conquered 37 species. Never once have I returned without victory. But today, I must report something different. He pressed a button on his wrist, and a hologram appeared above the central platform. It showed the Prometheus in all its terrible glory. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even the high leaned forward in their seats. This is the UES Prometheus said. It is a human warship. Its length is 87 kilometers. It carries weapons capable of destroying planets, and according to the humans, it is just the first of its kind. Silence, complete and total silence. Then Hive spoke. His voice was like grinding stones. This must be a trick. No species developed such technology in so short a time. Our scouts reported the humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 3 years ago. The humans deceived our scouts deliberately, replied. They showed us only what they wanted us to see. They have been preparing for first contact for over 200 years. 200 years. The voice came from Hive. Her form shifted and rippled as she spoke, reflecting her agitation. That is impossible. We have sensors throughout the galaxy. We would have detected their industrial activity. Their territory lies in a region we considered worthless, said. Young stars, barren planets, sparse resources. We did not watch that area closely because we saw no reason to. The humans used this to their advantage. The hologram shifted, now showing the 53 ships that had waited behind the Prometheus. This is their first defensive fleet, continued. 53 vessels, and their admiral made it clear that this is only a small portion of their total military strength. Hive flickered with light. His crystal body changed colors as he processed the information. You are telling us that this young species has built a military force capable of challenging the Council. I am telling you that they have built a military force capable of destroying the Council, said. If we go to war with humanity, we will lose. The chamber erupted. Shouts and arguments filled the air. Representatives from the subject species demanded explanations. The High argued among themselves. Some accused of cowardice. Others accused him of exaggeration. A few simply sat in stunned silence. It took nearly an hour for order to be restored. When the noise finally died down, High of the rose from his seat. He was the oldest being in the chamber, perhaps the oldest being in the galaxy. His body was withered but his eyes burned with ancient intelligence. "Enough," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "Admiral has given us his report. Now we must decide what to do." "We should send a larger fleet," High growled. "Show these humans the true might of the Council. One ship, no matter how large, cannot stand against 1,000. "And if they have more ships hidden?" High asked. "If this Prometheus is truly just the first of its kind, they may be building more even as we speak. Do we really want to commit our forces without knowing what we face?" "We could send spies," suggested High of the. His voice clicked and buzzed as he spoke. "Infiltrate their territory, learn their true strength before acting." "The humans have already shown they can deceive our sensors," High said. "What makes you think our spies would be any more successful?" The arguments continued. Every option was proposed and criticized. Every plan was found to have flaws. And through it all, the image of the Prometheus hung above them, a constant reminder of the threat they faced. Finally, High spoke again. "There is another option we have not discussed." The chamber fell silent. "We could accept their terms." The silence became absolute. No one even breathed. "They asked for peaceful relations between equals," continued. "They do not want war. They want recognition. They want respect. If we give them what they ask for, we may avoid conflict entirely." "Equals?" High roared. "The Council does not have equals. We are the supreme power in this galaxy. We have ruled for 12,000 years. We do not bow to upstart species who build one big ship and think they can threaten us." "One big ship that could destroy everything we have built," replied calmly. "Pride is a luxury we may no longer be able to afford." "I will not hear this," stood up, his massive form towering over the chamber. "They have never retreated from a fight. We will crush these humans and hang their leaders from the gates of this very city." "Sit down," his voice was like ice. "You speak of war as if it were a game. It is not. War with humanity would cost us millions of ships and billions of lives. Even if we won, we would be so weakened that every subject species would see their chance to rebel. The Council would not survive." Glared at the ancient, but slowly sat back down. "I agree with," High said. "We must be practical. The humans have offered us a way to avoid war. We should at least explore it." "But we cannot simply accept their terms," High said. "To acknowledge them as equals would be to admit our weakness. Every subject species would take note. Our authority would be undermined." "Then we must find a middle path," High said. "A way to negotiate without appearing weak. Perhaps we could send a diplomatic mission, open formal discussions, buy ourselves time to learn more about the humans and their capabilities." Nodded slowly. "That is wise counsel, but we must choose our diplomats carefully. The humans will not be fooled by the usual tricks. They have shown themselves to be intelligent and prepared. We need someone who can speak to them honestly and find common ground." All eyes turned too. The old admiral felt his heart sink. "You want me to return to them?" "You have already met their admiral," said. "You have seen their ship. You understand the situation better than anyone else in this chamber. Yes, Grand Admiral, we want you to return to human space, not as a conqueror but as an ambassador." Wanted to refuse. He wanted to retire to some quiet planet and forget he had ever heard the name Prometheus. But he had served the Council his entire life. He could not stop now. "Very well," he said. "I will go, but I will need proper authority to negotiate, and I will need something to offer them. The humans rejected our standard terms. We must give them something new." The High exchanged glances. "You will have full authority to negotiate on behalf of the Council," said. "As for what to offer them, that is up to you. Find out what they want. Find out what they will accept. And above all, prevent war. The survival of the Council may depend on your success." bowed his head. "I understand. I will leave immediately." He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the arguments resumed. The High would continue to debate and scheme. Some would plot against the humans. Others would plot against each other. It was the way of the council. But had a different task now. He had to make peace with a species that frightened him more than anything he had ever faced. He had to look Admiral in the eye and admit that the council was not supreme. He had to find a way for two civilizations to coexist without destroying each other. It seemed impossible, but then so did the Prometheus, and the humans had built that. Perhaps thought, it was time for the council to learn that impossible was just a word. He returned to his ship and gave orders to prepare for departure. In a few days, he would be back in human space, and this time he would not be bringing warships and demands. He would be bringing questions and hope. As the eternal light left orbit and jumped to faster-than-light speed, sat alone in his quarters, he thought about the humans, about their strength and their patience, about the 200 years they had spent preparing for this moment. They were not like any species the council had ever encountered. They were something new, something different. And perhaps thought that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The stars blurred around him as he traveled toward the unknown, toward the humans, toward the future. Whatever that future might hold, Grand Admiral arrived at the edge of human space 7 days later. This time he came alone. One ship, no weapons charged, no threatening formations, just an old diplomat on what might be the most important mission of his life. The Prometheus was waiting for him. It hung in the same position as before, its dark hull blocking out the stars, but this time noticed something different. There were more ships around it now, not warships but smaller vessels, transports, freighters, worker ships moving materials and personnel. The humans were building something. Even now, in the middle of a potential interstellar crisis, they were working, expanding, growing. It made uncomfortable. Every moment the council spent debating, the humans were getting stronger. His communications officer looked up from his console. "Admiral, the humans are hailing us." "Put it through." The screen flickered and Admiral's face appeared. She looked exactly as remembered her. Calm, confident, completely in control. "Admiral," she said, "I admit I am surprised to see you return so soon, and with only one ship this time. No more fleets." "I am not here for war, Admiral. The Council has sent me as an ambassador. They wish to negotiate." His eyebrow rose slightly. "Negotiate? That is a different word than I expected to hear from the Galactic Council." Perhaps the Council is learning new words. For a moment said nothing. She studied through the screen, her dark eyes searching for deception. Then slowly she smiled. "Very well, Ambassador. You are welcome to come aboard the Prometheus. I will have my crew prepare quarters for you and your staff. We have much to discuss." The connection ended and let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The first step was done. The humans had agreed to talk. Now came the hard part. He took a shuttle to the Prometheus. As he approached, the true scale of the ship became even more apparent. His shuttle was like a dust particle floating toward a mountain. The hangar bay that swallowed them could have held his entire flagship with room to spare. When he stepped off the shuttle, he found a welcoming party waiting. A dozen human soldiers in black armor stood at attention. They held weapons that looked advanced even by council standards. Behind them stood a group of officers in the same uniform Admiral had worn. One of them stepped forward. He was a young man with pale skin and red hair. He saluted crisply. "Ambassador, welcome aboard the UES Prometheus. I am Commander James, Admiral's aide. I have been assigned to be your guide during your stay." Inclined his head. "Thank you, Commander. I look forward to learning more about your impressive vessel." Smiled. "The Admiral thought you might say that. She has arranged a tour for you before your first meeting. She believes that seeing our capabilities firsthand will help facilitate honest negotiations. In other words, thought, they wanted to remind him exactly what he was dealing with before talks began. It was a clever tactic. He approved. The tour lasted several hours. Commander led through the ship's major sections, explaining their functions in simple terms. Paid careful attention, filing away every detail. The Prometheus was more than just a warship. It was a mobile city, a self-contained world that could operate independently for years without support. It had its own manufacturing facilities, its own farms, its own hospitals. It could grow its own food, build its own spare parts, and train its own crew replacements. It was the kind of ship you built when you expected to fight alone against overwhelming odds, when you knew that no one would come to help you. The weapons sections were even more impressive. The main cannon, which the humans called the Nova Lance, used a technology that did not fully understand. Something about concentrated stellar plasma and contained fusion reactions. The technical details went over his head, but the outcome was clear. A single shot could destroy a planet. The secondary weapons were almost as terrifying. Thousands of missile tubes, hundreds of laser batteries, point defense systems that could track and destroy targets moving faster than light. The Prometheus was not just a warship, it was a floating apocalypse. How long did it take to build this ship? Asked as they walked through yet another massive corridor. The Prometheus, about 30 years, replied. But the planning and development took much longer. We started working on the Titan-class concept over a century ago. And how many Titan-class ships do you have now? Smiled, that is a question for Admiral. They arrived at the conference room an hour later. It was a large space with a long table and comfortable chairs. One wall was entirely transparent, offering a spectacular view of space. Through it, could see the distant lights of the Council fleet he had left behind. Admiral was already waiting. She sat at the head of the table, a data pad in her hands. She looked up as entered. Ambassador, I trust the tour was educational. It was humbling, admitted. Your ship is remarkable. I have never seen anything like it. Thank you, please sit. We have much to discuss. Took a seat across from the Admiral. His staff arranged themselves behind him. His officers did the same on her side. Before we begin, said, I want to make something clear. We are not enemies. We do not want war with the Council. We have no interest in conquest or domination. All we want is to live in peace and pursue our own destiny. Then why build such a massive warship? Asked. Met his eyes. Because we knew you would come, and we knew what you would bring. Ships and soldiers, demands and threats. We have studied your Council, Ambassador. We know how you treat new species. We know about the ones who refuse to submit. We know what happened to them. She leaned forward. We built the Prometheus because we refused to be victims. We refused to kneel. We wanted to meet you as equals, not as subjects. And the only way to do that was to have enough power that you could not force us to do otherwise. Nodded slowly. I understand. In your position, I might have done the same. I am glad you see it that way. Now, what terms does the Council propose? This was the moment of truth. Took a deep breath and began. The Council is prepared to recognize humanity as an independent power. You will not be required to join the Council or pay tribute. Your territory will be respected. Your ships will have free passage through Council space. In exchange, we ask for a formal peace treaty and the establishment of diplomatic relations. Listened carefully. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. That is a significant change from your original offer. The Council has reconsidered its position. I see, glanced at her officers, then back at, what about trade, economic cooperation, military alliance? Those matters can be discussed once formal relations are established. And what guarantees do we have that the Council will honor this agreement? Your history suggests that you tend to break treaties when it suits you. felt a flash of anger but suppressed it. The human was not wrong. The council had broken many treaties over the when it was convenient to do so. What guarantees would you require? He asked instead. Considered. First, we want observer status on the council, not membership, just the right to have representatives present during council sessions. We want to know what you are planning. That is unusual but not impossible. Second, we want a demilitarized zone established between our territories, a buffer region where neither side maintains military forces. Any violation of this zone would be considered an act of war. Also reasonable. Third said, and her voice hardened, we want a public acknowledgement, not a private agreement, not a secret treaty. We want the council to announce to the entire galaxy that humanity is an independent power, equal in status to the council itself. No more, no less. Hesitated. This was the difficult part. A public acknowledgement would show weakness. Every subject species would take note. Some might even be encouraged to seek their own independence. But the alternative was war. And war with humanity would be far worse than a few embarrassed council members. I will need to consult with the High, he said finally, but I believe this can be arranged. Nodded. Good, then we have a basis for negotiation. The talks continued for 3 days. Every detail was discussed and debated. The exact boundaries of the demilitarized zone, the rights and responsibilities of observers, the wording of the public announcement. 100 small issues that needed to be resolved before any agreement could be signed. Found himself growing to respect the humans. They were tough negotiators, but they were fair. They did not try to squeeze every advantage out of the situation. They did not make unreasonable demands. They simply wanted what they had asked for from the beginning: recognition, respect, equality. On the 3rd day, as they were discussing the final details of the demilitarized zone, asked a question that had been bothering him. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? She looked up from her data pad. You may ask, I may not answer. Why did humanity choose to hide your true capabilities? You must have known that we would eventually find you. Why not reveal yourselves earlier and negotiate from a position of strength? Was quiet for a moment. Then she set down her data pad and looked out the window at the stars. We considered it, she said. Some of our leaders wanted to do exactly that. Announce ourselves to the galaxy and dare anyone to challenge us. But others pointed out the risks. If we showed our strength too early, the council might have united against us before we were ready. They might have sent everything they had. We were strong, but not strong enough to fight the entire galaxy. She turned back to, so we waited, we built in secret, we prepared, and we let you come to us on your own terms. That way, when the confrontation happened, it would be on our terms, in our territory, where we had the advantage. It was a gamble, said. Everything is a gamble, Ambassador. Life itself is a gamble. We simply made sure the odds were in our favor. Thought about this. The patience of humanity was remarkable. To plan for 200 years, to keep such a massive secret, to wait until the perfect moment to reveal themselves. The council had ruled for 12,000 years by being stronger than everyone else. But strength was not everything. Sometimes cunning and patience were worth more than all the warships in the galaxy. On the 4th day, the negotiations reached their conclusion. Had a draft agreement ready to present to the council. It contained everything the humans had asked for, along with some additional provisions that both sides had developed together. I must return to the center and present this to the High, told. There will be debates, arguments. Some will oppose any agreement with humanity. I understand. How long do you think it will take? A few weeks at most. The council can be slow, but they recognize the urgency of this situation. Nodded. We will wait, but understand this, Ambassador. We have been patient for a very long time. We are willing to wait a little longer for peace, but we will not wait forever. If the Council rejects this agreement, if they choose war instead, we will be ready. I will make sure they understand that. Prepared to leave. As he walked toward the shuttle bay, Commander fell into step beside him. Ambassador, may I say something? Glanced at the young human. Of course. I was born on the Prometheus. This ship has been my home my entire life. I have never known anything but preparation for this moment. The moment when we would finally meet the rest of the galaxy. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I always thought it would end in war. I thought we would have to fight for our survival. But you have shown me that maybe, just maybe, there is another way. I hope you succeed in convincing your council. I really do. Was touched by the young man's words. Thank you, Commander. I will do my best. He boarded his shuttle and left the Prometheus behind. As his ship jumped to faster-than-light speed and began the journey back to Council space, felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Hoping. The Council would resist, he knew. They would argue and debate and scheme. Some would never accept humanity as equals, but had seen the Prometheus. He had seen the humans. He knew what they were capable of. And he knew that the only way forward was peace. Now he just had to convince the rest of the galaxy. The Council chamber had never been so loud. Grand Admiral stood at the center of the room, holding the draft agreement in his hands. Around him, representatives from hundreds of species shouted and argued. The High themselves were barely maintaining order. This is surrender, High roared. His voice shook the walls. You would have us bow before these humans like frightened children. I would have us survive, replied calmly. That is more than some of your plans would achieve. They have never known surrender. We will fight to the last warrior before we accept such humiliation. Then the will fight alone, and the will die alone. The humans are not bluffing, High, they have the power to destroy us. The arguments continued for hours, answered every question, challenged every objection, defended every point of the agreement. He spoke until his throat was raw and his voice was hoarse, and slowly, one by one, he began to change minds. High of the was the first to support him openly. This agreement preserves everything essential, he said. Our territory remains intact. Our authority over our subjects continues. All we are giving up is the right to dominate a species that was never under our control in the first place. High of the agreed. The cost of war would be too high. Our shipyards cannot replace losses fast enough to match the humans. Within 10 years, they would overwhelm us through simple mathematics. Even High of the, who had initially opposed the agreement, eventually came around. The humans have proven they can deceive us. In war, that ability is more dangerous than any weapon. Better to have them as friends than as enemies. But not everyone was convinced. High continued to demand war. Several of the subject species representatives spoke against the agreement, fearing that it would encourage rebellions in their own territories. And High of the remained silent, her face unreadable. When the vote was finally called, it was close, 4 High in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention. High. All eyes turned to her. She was the oldest alive. She had served on the council for over 500 years. Her word carried enormous weight. High said softly, "The vote is tied. Your voice will decide the matter." Rose slowly from her seat. Her silver skin had darkened almost to black with age. Her glowing blue eyes were dim, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear and strong. I have served this council for 5 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species crawl out of the darkness and reach for the stars, and I have learned one thing above all others. She paused, looking around the chamber. Every eye was fixed on her. Change is not our enemy. It is our only constant companion. Those who resist change are swept away by it. Those who embrace it survive and grow stronger. She turned to face. You speak of honor and pride, High, but what good is honor when you are dead? What value is pride when your worlds are burning? The humans offer us a choice. We can accept them as equals and build something new, or we can fight them and watch everything we have built be destroyed. She returned to her seat. I vote in favor of the agreement. The chamber erupted in cheers and protests, but the decision was made, 5 votes to 2. The council had chosen peace. Allowed himself a small smile. He had done it. Against all odds, he had convinced the council to accept the human terms. Now, he just had to hope the humans would honor their side of the bargain. The announcement was made 3 days later. On every world in council space, the message was broadcast. On every station, every ship, every outpost, the people heard the news. The Galactic Council formally recognized the human race as an independent power, equal in status to the Council itself, neither subject nor enemy, a partner in the governance of the galaxy. The reaction was mixed. Some species celebrated the news, seeing it as a sign of new opportunities. Others were angry, feeling that the Council had shown weakness, and many were simply confused, wondering how a species they had never heard of could suddenly be equal to the masters of the galaxy. But on Earth, the human, there was only celebration. Watched the broadcast from his quarters on the Eternal Light. He saw crowds filling the streets of human cities. He saw fireworks lighting up the night sky. He saw children waving flags and adults crying with joy. For 200 years they had lived in fear. Fear of discovery, fear of conquest, fear of extinction, and now, finally, they were safe. It was, admitted, a beautiful sight. A week later, he returned to human space for the formal signing ceremony. This time, his ship was escorted by a fleet of human vessels, not as guards against a threat, but as an honor guard for a guest. The ceremony took place aboard the Prometheus. The great ship had been cleaned and decorated for the occasion. Banners hung from the walls. Musicians played strange human instruments. Food and drinks from a dozen worlds were served to the assembled dignitaries. Admiral met at the entrance to the main hall. She was wearing a dress uniform covered in medals and ribbons. She looked different than before, less like a warrior and more like a leader. "Ambassador," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting. "Welcome back to the Prometheus." Took her hand and shook it as he had been taught. "Admiral, thank you for having me." "Please call me. I think we are past formalities by now." "Then you must call me." She smiled. "Very well, shall we proceed?" The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Representatives from the Council and from Earth signed the official documents. Speeches were made. Promises were exchanged. And when it was done, the two civilizations were bound together in peace. Afterward, there was a reception. Found himself surrounded by curious humans who wanted to know about the Council. He answered their questions as best he could, discovering that they were not so different from any other species. They were curious, ambitious, sometimes foolish, sometimes wise. They laughed and argued and dreamed of the future. Just like everyone else. As the reception wound down, Admiral approached him with 2 glasses of something that smelled strongly of alcohol. "A human tradition," she said, offering him a glass. "We drink to seal important agreements." Took the glass and sniffed it cautiously. "What is this?" "Whiskey made from grain, aged for 20 years. Some of the best Earth has to offer." He took a small sip. The liquid burned his throat, but it was not unpleasant. There was a depth of flavor that surprised him. "It is good," he admitted. "Glad you think so," raised her glass. "To peace." "To peace," echoed. They drank together, 2 warriors who had come so close to destroying each other, 2 leaders who had chosen a better path. "May I ask you something?" said. "Of course. When we first met, you threatened to destroy my fleet. You showed me the Prometheus and all its weapons. You made it very clear that you could crush us if you chose to. But now, you celebrate peace and welcome us as friends. Which is the real humanity?" Considered the question. "Both. We are capable of great destruction, yes, but we are also capable of great compassion, great creativity, great love. We build warships because we must protect ourselves, but we would rather build bridges." She looked out the window at the stars. For most of our history, humans fought each other, wars that killed millions, weapons that could have destroyed our world. We nearly wiped ourselves out more than once, but we learned. We grew. We realized that our enemies were not so different from ourselves, that war was not the only way. She turned back to, "When we discovered we were not alone in the universe, we knew the same choice would come again. Fight or cooperate, destroy or build. And we decided as a species that we would choose peace if it was offered to us, but we would never be too weak to defend ourselves if peace was not possible." A wise approach. "We try," she smiled. "Now enough serious talk. Let me introduce you to some of our scientists. They have been dying to meet someone from the council. They have 1,000 questions about your technology." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and introductions. Met human engineers who wanted to know about council ship design. Human doctors who were fascinated by physiology. Human artists who wanted to understand alien cultures. It was overwhelming. The humans were so eager, so enthusiastic, so full of energy. They reminded of a young species taking its first steps into space. Except this young species had built the most powerful warship in the galaxy. The contradiction was fascinating. When he finally returned to his quarters that night, was exhausted but satisfied. The mission was complete. Peace had been achieved. The Council and humanity would now move forward together. But as he prepared for sleep, a message arrived on his personal terminal. It was from High. It read, "Do not think this is over. Some of our colleagues are not willing to accept defeat so easily. They are already plotting against the humans. I cannot stop them, but I can warn you. Be careful, and tell your new friends to be careful as well. The peace you have built is fragile. It will take constant effort to maintain." Read the message 3 times, then he deleted it. He had expected as much. The council was not a unified body. It was a collection of competing interests held together by tradition and mutual fear. Some of its members would never accept humanity as equals. They would work to undermine the peace, to create conflicts, to drive the two civilizations apart. But would not let that happen. He had come too far, worked too hard, risked too much. He would defend this peace with everything he had. And he suspected the humans would do the same. He composed a reply to, "Thank you for the warning. I will remain vigilant, and I will ensure that humanity understands the situation. Together, we will protect what we have built." He sent the message and lay down to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities. But for tonight there was peace. And that was enough. The stars shone through the window of his quarters. Somewhere out there, the Prometheus waited, a symbol of human strength and determination, a reminder of what they could become when pushed too far. But also a symbol of hope, a hope that different species could find common ground, that old enemies could become new friends, that the galaxy could change for the better. Closed his eyes and smiled. Perhaps the future would not be so dark after all. 10 years had passed since the signing of the peace treaty. 10 years of change. 10 years of growth. 10 years that had transformed the galaxy in ways no one had predicted. Stood on the observation deck of the Council's space station, looking out at the stars. He was old now, even by standards. His silver skin had turned almost black. His glowing blue eyes were barely visible. His body ached with the weight of centuries. But his mind was sharp as ever, and his heart was full of something he had not felt in a very long time. Pride. The station around him was a marvel of engineering. It had been built jointly by the Council and humanity, a symbol of their partnership, a hub for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Ships from dozens of species came and went through its ports. Languages from across the galaxy echoed through its corridors. and at the center of it all, two flags flew side by side. The banner of the Galactic Council, with its 7 stars representing the founding races, and the blue and green flag of Earth, with its simple image of a single world. Equal partners, just as the treaty had promised. The door behind him opened, and familiar footsteps approached. Did not need to turn around to know who it was. "You are thinking deep thoughts again, old friend." Smiled. "I am thinking about how much has changed." Admiral stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. She had aged as well. Her hair had turned and lines marked her face, but her eyes were still sharp and her presence still commanded respect. She had retired from the military 5 years ago. Now she served as Earth's senior ambassador to the Council. It was a role that suited her well. She was tough when needed, but also wise enough to know when to compromise. "It has changed," she agreed, "more than I ever expected." Nodded. The changes had come quickly once the treaty was signed. Trade routes opened between Council space and human territory. Technology was exchanged. Scientists collaborated on projects that would have been impossible for either side alone. The humans shared their innovations in energy production and material science. The Council shared its knowledge of faster-than-light travel and genetic engineering. Both sides grew stronger. But the changes went beyond technology. Ideas crossed the borders as well. Human concepts of individual rights and democratic government spread to some of the Council's subject species. Council philosophies of balance and long-term thinking influenced human politics. The galaxy was becoming something new, something neither side had anticipated. "Do you ever regret it?" asked, "accepting our offer of peace instead of fighting?" Considered the question. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had refused, if we had fought the Council and won. Would we have become conquerors ourselves? Would we have ruled the galaxy with an iron fist?" She shook her head. "No, I do not regret it. Peace was the right choice. It was the harder choice in some ways, but it was the right one." "The harder choice." "War is simple. You fight. You win or lose. Peace is complicated. You have to talk, negotiate, compromise, find common ground with people who think differently than you. It requires patience and humility and a willingness to see things from another perspective." She smiled. "Humans are not naturally good at those things. We had to learn." "You have learned well," said, "better than some of my own people." He thought of Hai, who had refused to accept the treaty until the very end. The old warrior had spent years trying to undermine the peace. He had secretly funded rebels in human territory. He had spread propaganda against humanity throughout Council space. He had even tried to assassinate himself. But in the end, his plots had failed. The treaty was too strong. The benefits of peace were too obvious. And when evidence of his schemes was finally exposed, even his own people had turned against him. Had been removed from the Council in disgrace. He had died shortly after, bitter and alone, a reminder that those who could not accept change would be swept away by it. "How are the negotiations going?" asked, changing the subject. Sighed, slowly. "They want more favorable trade terms. They are concerned about the spread of human influence, and there is a new species on the outer rim that is causing problems for everyone." Yes, they are aggressive and expanding rapidly. Several border systems have already fallen to them. Frowned. "That is concerning. What is the Council planning to do?" "That is what we are negotiating. Some want a military response, others want diplomacy, and a few suggest we simply leave them alone and let them burn themselves out." "What do you think?" Was quiet for a moment. "I think we should try diplomacy first. They may be aggressive, but they are also young. They do not know their own strength. If we approach them carefully, we may be able to guide them toward a better path." "Like you did with us." "Something like that," he smiled, "although I hope it will be less terrifying this time." Laughed. "Yes, I imagine meeting the Prometheus was quite a shock." You have no idea. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ships come and go. It was a peaceful scene, a sign of how far they had come. Finally spoke again. I received word from Earth yesterday. The new Titan-class ship has been completed. Raised an eyebrow, another one. The UES Hercules, even larger than the Prometheus. The shipyards are already working on 2 more. Your people do not stop building, do they? No, we learned long ago that peace must be protected. If we stop being strong, someone will take advantage of our weakness. Better to have power and not need it than to need it and not have it. Understood. The Council had thought the same way for thousands of years. Perhaps that was why humans and the Council had been able to find common ground so easily. They both understood that the galaxy was a dangerous place. Will the new ship be joining the fleet here? He asked. Eventually. First, it will patrol the outer rim. The situation concerns our military commanders as well. Good. A show of strength may help convince them that peaceful negotiation is the better option. They talked for another hour, discussing politics and trade and the thousand small details that kept the peace running smoothly. It was the kind of conversation had never expected to have with a human, and yet, over the years, had become one of his closest friends. How strange life could be. When they finally parted, returned to his quarters, he had work to do, reports to read, messages to send. The business of diplomacy never stopped. But before he began, he took a moment to look at the small collection of objects on his desk, souvenirs from a long career. There was a medal from the Council, awarded for his service in the first contact mission. There was a photograph of him standing with Admiral on the day the treaty was signed. There was a small crystal given to him by Hai, representing the friendship between their peoples. And there was a bottle of whiskey. The same kind had given him on that first day of peace. He kept it as a reminder of how far they had come. Sat down and began to work. There were messages from the human colony worlds, reporting on their progress. Messages from Council species, expressing their concerns and requests. Messages from the new observer delegations, seeking guidance on their role. So much to do, so many people depending on him to keep the peace. It was exhausting, but it was also the most important work he had ever done. As the hours passed, found his mind wandering to the future. What would the galaxy look like in another 10 years, in 100, in 1,000? The treaty was holding. The partnership was growing, but nothing lasted forever. Eventually, new challenges would arise, new threats, new opportunities. The galaxy would change again as it always did. But was no longer afraid of change. He had seen what could happen when different species worked together. He had seen the power of cooperation and understanding. He had seen the future that was possible when fear gave way to hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and Council and Earth, united by a treaty that had begun with fear and grown into something far greater. A message arrived on his terminal. It was from the human president, thanking him for his continued service and inviting him to visit Earth for a celebration of the treaty's 10th anniversary. Smiled. He had never been to Earth. He had heard it was beautiful, with blue oceans and green forests and skies filled with birds, very different from the harsh metal cities of the Council. Perhaps it was time to see it for himself. He composed a reply, accepting the invitation. Then he returned to his work, feeling lighter than he had in years. Outside his window, the station hummed with activity. Ships came and went. People of all species walked the corridors, working and talking and living their lives. The flags of the Council and Earth flew side by side, symbols of a partnership that had all expectations. 10 years ago, the Council had sent a fleet to conquer a primitive species. They had found something very different. They had found humanity, strong, proud, unwilling to bow before anyone. And instead of war, they had found peace. It was not perfect, Nothing ever was. There were still conflicts, disagreements, problems that needed solving, but the foundation was solid, the commitment was real, and the future was bright. Worked until late into the night. When he finally went to sleep, he dreamed of Earth, of blue oceans and green forests, of a planet that had produced a species that had changed everything. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The next morning woke to a new day. There was work to be done, peace to maintain, a future to build. He dressed and left his quarters, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. As he walked through the corridors of the station, he passed humans and a dozen other species. They nodded to him respectfully. Some even smiled. It was a good sign. The peace was holding, the partnership was growing, and together they would face whatever came next. Paused at a window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, new species were developing. New civilizations were rising. Some would be friends, others might be enemies, but whatever happened, they would not face it alone. The galaxy had changed, and was proud to have been part of that change. He continued walking, heading toward the council chambers where another day of negotiations awaited. There was work to be done. And he would do it. For peace, for partnership, for the future. The stars shone bright through the windows of the station. They had shone for billions of years. They would shine for billions more. And under their light, the people of the galaxy would continue to grow and change and reach for something greater. That was the promise of the future, and it was a promise worth keeping. Smiled and walked on.